Are big pharmaceutical companies the bastions of ethics and morality like we believe they are? No, of course not. And absolutely no one thinks they are. Big Pharma are masters at hiding scandals away from the public eye, but they can be found with deep research. Why expose some of the most evil practices in modern business? Because your health, and perhaps even your life, may depend on it. So buckle up. Each of the following stories delves into deceit, greed, and cold-hearted exploitation, each worse than the last. Yes, big pharma scandals happen every year, and most get efficiently swept under the media's rug. I'm not going to bore you with scandals about making a few extra dollars or hiding side effects. I made this video to open some eyes to the real horrifying scandals that you probably haven't heard about. Ready? Let's start off with a bang, and by bang I mean Bayer. Bayer's HIV-tainted blood products, selling death overseas. Imagine you're a hemophiliac in the 1980s, relying on Bayer's blood-clotting medication to stay alive. Then, without warning, the very treatment that was supposed to save you starts killing people instead. By the time doctors realized the product was contaminated with HIV, thousands of patients in the US were already infected. Bayer swiftly pulled the product from the domestic market, but what happened next would defy belief. Rather than destroying the tainted medication, Bayer shipped it overseas. Vulnerable populations in Latin America, Asia, and Africa became the company's new market.
Internal documents show that after this company positively, absolutely knew that they had a medication that was infected with the AIDS virus, they took the product off the market in the U.S. and then they dumped it in France, Europe, Asia, and Latin America. The medicine's called Factor VIII. It was an injection medicine that was used for hemophiliacs, mostly children. Children had been born with an incurable disease.
Hold on, Mike. So hold on. So you're telling me that Bayer knew that this drug was infected with the AIDS virus. They yanked it from the market in America, and then they dumped it in markets overseas?
They had to figure out a way, Joe, to make a profit on a product that they could not sell in America. So they made a huge profit.
Documents unearthed years later revealed that Bayer executives knowingly prioritized profits over human lives. The decision to sell these deadly treatments was chillingly calculated. They even ran cost-benefit analyses to weigh the financial risks of lawsuits against the profits from overseas sales. The fallout was catastrophic. Families across the globe watched their loved ones die from AIDS, a death sentence at the time. Despite lawsuits and international outrage, Bayer has never faced criminal charges for its actions. The company's strategy: silence. Purdue Pharma and the selling addiction. The story of Purdue Pharma reads like a dystopian novel about corporate greed. In the mid-1990s, Purdue unleashed OxyContin onto the market, touting it as a revolutionary painkiller with a low risk of addiction. Behind the scenes, however, internal documents painted a far grimmer picture. Purdue knew from the beginning that OxyContin was highly addictive. But instead of addressing this, they doubled down, launching aggressive marketing campaigns aimed at doctors and even incentivizing them to prescribe the drug in higher doses. Sales reps were trained to downplay the risks, often using misleading data to convince healthcare professionals that OxyContin was a safe option for chronic pain. Communities were flooded with prescriptions, and addiction rates soared. Small towns in Appalachia, where physical labor often led to chronic pain, were particularly devastated, earning the region the nickname the opioid belt. As the bodies piled up from overdoses, the Sackler family, owners of Purdue, amassed obscene wealth. Even as lawsuits and investigative reports exposed their role in fueling the epidemic, they continued to deny responsibility. Today, the opioid crisis has claimed over 500,000 lives, with countless others still battling addiction. And while Purdue filed for bankruptcy, the Sacklers walked away billionaires. Ranbaxy's fake drug data and selling lies. In the world of generic drugs, Indian pharmaceutical giant Ranbaxy once stood as a symbol of affordable healthcare for millions. But behind closed doors, a horrifying story of corruption and deceit unfolded. It started when Dinesh Thakur, a Ranbaxy executive, stumbled upon a shocking truth. The company had been falsifying test results to gain FDA approval for its drugs. Thakur discovered that Ranbaxy's labs were running sham tests or outright fabricating data to make their drugs appear safe and effective. Even worse, the company knowingly shipped substandard medications to global markets, including life-saving HIV treatments destined for Africa. These weren't minor quality issues. Some of the drugs were completely ineffective, putting patients' lives at serious risk. When Thakur tried to raise concerns internally, he was ignored. Realizing the gravity of the situation, he became a whistleblower, providing the FDA with thousands of documents that exposed Ranbaxy's fraud. The results were financially significant, but didn't result in any criminal charges or firings. Ranbaxy paid $500 million in fines. GSK's bribery empire in China. In 2013, Chinese authorities uncovered a pharmaceutical crime ring so vast it shocked even the most cynical observers. At its center was GlaxoSmithKline, GSK, a British pharmaceutical giant that had turned bribery into a finely tuned business model. The scheme was simple but devastating. GSK funneled money to doctors, hospital administrators, and health officials to push their drugs over competitors. The company set up fake travel agencies to launder the bribe money, which totaled nearly $500 million. In return, doctors prescribed GSK's drugs, even when cheaper or more effective alternatives were available. The results? Inflated healthcare costs for Chinese citizens and, in some cases, patients receiving unnecessary or harmful medications. When Chinese police raided GSK's offices, they found evidence of widespread corruption, including internal memos detailing how to dodge detection. The fallout was immense. GSK was fined $489 million, and several executives faced criminal charges. Insulin price gouging, holding diabetics hostage. Insulin has been around for over a century, and its creators originally sold the patent for just $1, hoping to keep it affordable for diabetics. Fast forward to the 21st century, and insulin's price had skyrocketed by over 1,200%, leaving millions of diabetics in the US scrambling to afford their life-saving medication. At the heart of the scandal were pharmaceutical giants Eli Lilly, Novo Nordisk, and Sanofi, who repeatedly increased prices in near lockstep. Lawsuits and investigations revealed a disturbing pattern of collusion, where these companies worked together to keep prices high and maintain their dominance in the market. Meanwhile, patients were forced to ration their insulin, often at great risk to their health. Some even turned to black market sources or crowdfunding just to survive. Public outrage grew as stories emerged of diabetics dying because they couldn't afford their medication. Finally, after years of pressure, the companies began capping insulin prices in 2023 after Congress passed the Cap Insulin Prices Act. Roche's Tamiflu debacle, profiting from panic. During the 2009 swine flu pandemic, governments around the world scrambled to stockpile Tamiflu, an antiviral drug manufactured by Roche, spending billions of taxpayer dollars. The company claimed Tamiflu could significantly reduce flu complications, hospitalizations, and deaths. But years later, an independent review of Roche's withheld trial data revealed a troubling truth. The drug was far less effective than advertised. The Cochrane collaboration found that Tamiflu shortened flu symptoms by less than a day and had no meaningful impact on complications like pneumonia. Even worse, Roche had deliberately hidden trial data that highlighted severe side effects, including psychiatric disturbances and kidney issues. By the time the truth came out, Roche had made billions off public fear and misinformation. Pfizer's Trovan trials in Nigeria. In 1996, Nigeria was in the grip of a deadly meningitis outbreak, which claimed over 12,000 lives. With hospitals overwhelmed and resources scarce, pharmaceutical giant Pfizer saw an opportunity, not just to help, but to test its experimental antibiotic Trovan on sick children. Under the guise of humanitarian aid, Pfizer conducted a trial on 200 children in Kano, the epicenter of the outbreak. What families didn't know was that their children were being used as test subjects for a drug that hadn't been fully vetted. Pfizer skipped critical steps in the clinical trial process, including obtaining proper informed consent from parents. Many families later testified they were never told the treatment was experimental. Some thought their children were receiving proven treatments for meningitis, not participating in a risky drug trial. The consequences were devastating. Trovan caused severe side effects, including liver failure, kidney damage, deafness, and, in some cases, death. Parents watched helplessly as their children's conditions deteriorated, and many accused Pfizer of treating their loved ones as disposable test subjects. The outrage was palpable. Families claimed Pfizer had bypassed international research standards, exploiting a crisis to cut costs and fast-track its drug to market. Internal documents later revealed that Pfizer's own lawyers had warned that conducting the trial without proper oversight violated ethical guidelines. Yet the company proceeded, prioritizing speed and profits over the safety of the children it claimed to help. Trovan was later banned in Europe due to its toxicity and restricted in the US, but not before Pfizer used the Nigerian trial data to push for global approval. Trovan caused devastating side effects, including liver damage, deafness, and even death in some children. Families accuse Pfizer of treating their children like guinea pigs, conducting the trials without ethical oversight or informed consent. Pfizer denied wrongdoing, but internal memos showed the company knew it had violated international research standards. The case led to lawsuits and an undisclosed settlement. Novartis and kickbacks. In 2020, Novartis, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, was fined $678 million in the US for orchestrating an elaborate kickback scheme. The company paid doctors through fake speaking engagements, lavish dinners, and other perks to prescribe its drugs over competitors. The most shocking part? These weren't minor bribes. Novartis executives created entire programs to funnel money and gifts to high-prescribing physicians, ensuring that their products dominated the market. Patients were often prescribed drugs they didn't need or more expensive options when cheaper alternatives were available. Novartis ultimately paid an undisclosed fine. Sanofi and Sanofi had not fully disclosed a critical risk. For individuals who had never been exposed to dengue, the vaccine could actually make subsequent infections more severe. Over 800,000 children were vaccinated before Sanofi admitted the danger, leading to widespread panic and outrage among parents and the public. The consequences were devastating. Reports of children dying after receiving the vaccine surfaced, igniting protests and calls for accountability. Allegations of negligence and corruption followed, with accusations that the Philippine government had fast-tracked the vaccine despite red flags. Some of the Sanofi executives and government officials involved in the rollout eventually did face criminal charges. Biogen's Aduhelm and the FDA scandal. In 2021, Biogen released Aduhelm, a drug it claimed could slow the progression of Alzheimer's disease, a glimmer of hope for millions affected by the condition. But the launch quickly turned into one of the most controversial moments in pharmaceutical history. Clinical trials showed that Aduhelm provided no clear benefit to patients, yet Biogen managed to secure FDA approval in a process riddled with ethical red flags. An independent advisory panel overwhelmingly voted against approval, citing insufficient evidence that the drug worked. Yet the FDA pushed it through, later revealed to have held unusually close meetings with Biogen executives during the decision-making process. Emails and internal documents pointed to potential collusion, raising serious concerns about regulatory integrity. The scandal didn't end there. Biogen priced Aduhelm at an astronomical $56,000 per year, sparking outrage among patients, caregivers, and policymakers. Public backlash forced Medicare to restrict coverage, and healthcare providers began refusing to prescribe the drug. The fallout from the Aduhelm scandal was immediate and far-reaching. Advocacy groups and medical professionals accuse both Biogen and the FDA of exploiting desperate Alzheimer's patients and their families for financial gain. Even some former FDA officials called the approval process a betrayal of public trust, with several resigning in protest. As lawsuits and investigations mounted, the controversy reignited debates over the cozy relationship between regulators and Big Pharma. Aduhelm remains available to patients willing to pay out of pocket. Turing Pharmaceuticals and Martin Shkreli. In 2015, Turing Pharmaceuticals, under the leadership of Martin Shkreli, acquired the rights to Daraprim, a drug critical for treating toxoplasmosis, a parasitic infection that can be life-threatening for immunocompromised individuals, including those with HIV, AIDS, and certain cancer patients. Shortly after acquiring the drug, Turing increased its price from $13.50 per pill to $750. A more than 5,000% hike. The sudden jump sparked immediate outcry from patients, healthcare providers, and advocacy groups. Daraprim had been on the market for decades and was considered the standard treatment for toxoplasmosis. The manufacturing costs remained relatively low, making the price increase appear purely profit-driven. Hospitals and healthcare providers scrambled to adjust, with some rationing the drug or seeking alternatives due to the prohibitive costs. Patients dependent on the medication faced financial strain, as many insurers initially balked at covering the higher price. Shkreli defended the move, arguing that the revenue would fund research into newer, more effective treatments for toxoplasmosis. However, critics noted that Turing invested little in research and development after the price hike. Shkreli's public appearances and interviews exacerbated the backlash. His smug, unapologetic demeanor and social media taunts, including calling the price hike a great business decision, solidified his reputation as a public villain. The outrage led to congressional hearings where Shkreli invoked his Fifth Amendment rights, further fueling public anger. While Daraprim's price hike remained legal under U.S. pharmaceutical regulations, the controversy spotlighted the broader issue of price gouging in the pharmaceutical industry. Shkreli was later arrested and convicted in 2017, not for his actions at Turing Pharmaceuticals, but for unrelated securities fraud tied to his management of hedge funds. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, I hope you will like and subscribe. Comment if you like or hate Martin Shkreli.